Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy McGlashan. I work at the Center for Careers and Internships, and part of what I do is academic collaboration initiatives and outreach, including offering up these what we call field guides for students in a particular area of study. And today's for geography. We do have 2 more coming up, just so you know, for international politics and economics on April 11th and 12th. And then English on April 25th and 26th. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. Field guides are one way that we at the Center for Careers and Internships help to support the message of why you're here for liberal arts education. That is, you can study in any area of interest to you and know that you can succeed and go in a number of different directions. And we do this by bringing back alumni by major, in addition to all the work we do that you may be familiar with that connects you to people, alumni in different industries. This is about the area of study and how it helps you branch out in a number of different areas, how you can apply both what you learn in the major, but also more broadly what you learn in your liberal arts education. I love that joke. Was it your seminar, your senior seminar that you required to be here? Oh,
I strongly encourage.
Oh, you strongly encourage. And actually, Naomi, are you here?
Many of them are
Yeah.
here.
Oh, anyway, that's the message I had gotten back. But anyway, thank you for your strong encouragement. And evidenced by, yeah, exactly. We're thrilled with the panel we have today too, and you'll hear from their stories, the different directions that they've gone using their major. And so I think one of the takeaways is it's all about the major and it has nothing to do with the major. And that's what we want to generate. I usually have in front of me, and I'm pretending to wave. Some of you may be familiar with our major guides. That's another way of showing you how the path from Middlebury to different areas and careers. And so on the front of the major, and we have copies of these for all majors in our office and online. On the front is the major and what the major is about and what are the learning goals for the major. And then you flip it on the back are how your learning goals for your major translates into professional competencies that are applicable in any industry. And then a list of just a snapshot of some internships and jobs that alumni who graduated with that major have went on and did. So it's perfect for taking home at Thanksgiving when people say, what are you gonna do with your geography major? Or what are you gonna do this summer? And you can say, look at all the things that I can do. I wanna mention just a few more things. So there are still slots available for the one-to-one chats tomorrow. Those you would do online through Handshake. We'll leave those links open until tomorrow morning. I don't think everyone's available, but I think most are. But I will also say that all of the alumni presenting today or part of the panel today are also on Mid to Mid. Are you familiar with Mid to Mid? Who's familiar? Okay, awesome. Some head nods, some yes. And that's our alumni directory. That's our way where students can connect with alumni, and you can search by geography. You can search by geography. You could search by other areas that may be of interest to you, by industry. And so that's a great way to connect with alumni and establish relationships. And all of them, as I said, are on Mid to Mid, and you can find them that way. The other thing I'll say is you don't have to necessarily be interested in what they're doing for work to want to carry on a conversation with them tomorrow, or for that matter, to have a conversation with the alumni who are coming for the IP&E and English field guides later in April. It could be you like something that they say. They're in a region that you're interested in. Their path was circuitous, I never say that right. And that's how you want to pursue your post-Middlebury life. So whatever kind of rings your bell, go ahead and have a conversation. That's what they're here for. In person, and then Stephen even online tomorrow. So that's why they came, is to connect with you. The other the other piece I'll mention around that is, I know the snacks are out there now. If we could bring them in here and put cellophane over them until 5:30 or so, we would, only because the whole purpose of that is to munch a little bit and network with the alumni after the chat, after the panel, to bring individual questions, continue the conversation, maybe set up for your one-to-one chat tomorrow, or if you can't make it for a one-to-one chat, that's your opportunity. So I hope, as much as I'm facetious, I'm happy that you're munching now, but I also hope that you'll stick around afterwards and chat with them a little bit afterwards. That's really what those are for. I just have a few thank yous to say, and then I'm gonna turn the mic over to Pete. So thank you to Bill Hegman, who was unable to be here. As many of you know, he was in a serious ski accident. And thank you, Pete, for stepping in, but he would be moderating otherwise. And to Emma and Sam, who were the student advisory and who participated throughout this process. They really were equal partners. And then thank you to my colleagues at CCI, including Tracy Himalisham, who connects with many of you I know, and with Heather, where's Heather? Heather's out there with Heather Durante and Nicole Vail, who took care of the beautiful communications and setting up all the logistics. And I could not do these without you. I think I covered everything. Yes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete, and we'll go for about an hour, and then we'll hope that you'll network. So thank you very much. There you go. And there is another mic.
Yeah.
Oh, can I say, sorry, one more thing. We just have one new feature today. We've never done this, but Ashali, so we've never done an asynchronous, we've done hybrid, but we've never done an asynchronous field guide before. One of the alumni, Ashali, is in India, and it's 4:30 or something like that at home right now. So she wasn't going to participate here, but she is available for one-to-one chats tomorrow. And she did record a conversation with Bill. And we have a segment of that we're going to play as part of tonight's panel. But then the whole, and it's about 25 minutes, the whole segment recording is on the website, on the CCI website for this event. And you can watch other sections of it if you like, once you hear what she has to say and are curious to hear more once you've heard these all. So I encourage you to do that, because she's really doing some really great work over there. Okay, sorry, thanks.
All right, thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
I really like these field guides. I think this is at least the third one in geography that we put together, because it gives all of you an opportunity to interact with the future yous, the alumni that have gone on to land in things that you could easily connect to geography, but also land in careers that might be a lot harder to connect to geography, at least on the surface. So having this opportunity, I think, is really great. I also like the chance to see some of my former students that come back either in 3 dimensions or 2 dimensions. And the way we have this planned is we're going to have all of the panelists give a short introduction, kind of describing just what they do, like who they are, where they live, and what they do. And then I have a few canned questions that we've developed to try to move the panel discussion along. But what I'm really hoping for is, after those introductions and maybe that first question for me, you all can drive the discussion, because what they're really here is to have a dialogue with you and not with me. Okay? So what's exciting is we have people representing lots of different fields. We have folks from, I think Steve's the senior most panelist. He says, as he has to put on his glasses to read what year he's from. Steve graduated in the class of 07. And then the most recent panelist, I think, is Emma from the class of 2021. All right. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. And like I said, describe what you do and maybe where you live. And then after we go through those introductions, we'll play Ashali's clip. And then I'm going to ask you, so you can be thinking about it, like describe the path that you took to get to where you are right now. Okay? And in no particular order, but since Cathryn's right here, you're first.
Hi, I'm Cathryn. I'm from the class of 2015. I live in Washington, D.C. I'm in the Navy. I'm a surface warfare officer, and I work at the Pentagon right now, so on my shore assignment.
All right, I'm Allie. I'm class of 2010.5. I currently work as a senior cartographer at National Geographic, and I live in Denver, Colorado. Hi, I'm Emily, graduated class of 2018. I currently live in New York City, where I work for the New York City Department of City Planning, where I am a climate and sustainability planner.
Hi, I'm Emma. I graduated in 2021. Like Pete just mentioned, I work in New York also, and I'm currently working as a graphics reporter focusing on cartography at the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, everyone. Stephen Chester. I live in Denver, Colorado. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Boy, I would have loved to be back in Middlebury right now. Let's see. I am the land use and community planner for Vail Resorts. We own and operate about 41 ski resorts across the world.
Want to go to Ashali?
Yeah, you want to queue up
Yep.
Ashali?
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Bill, and thanks for having me. It's really nice to be connected to Middlebury, even though I'm so far away. So I really appreciate this. So to start things off, I'm Ashali. Bill said I graduated in 2014. I was a geography major. Currently, I actually have two roles. I'm the director of India's first urban living lab at a social science research collective called Transitions Research. Our work is focused on co-creating equitable climate solutions and testing them in communities and neighborhoods in small Indian cities. And small Indian cities are like large American cities, but small Indian cities. I also work part-time on a project or need basis as a senior urban planner at the Center for Social and Behavior Change at Ashoka University, which is India's first liberal arts institution. I lead the mobility vertical of a project called Encouraging Low Carbon Lifestyles, which is supported by the MacArthur Foundation, where I've led 4 research studies on the behavioral barriers to the uptake of low carbon mobility modes like public transportation, cycling, walking. We've even looked at the purchase of electric vehicles. So that's currently what I do. My work with the Urban Living Lab is currently in 4 different cities, but my work with Ashoka University has been focused primarily in some of India's largest cities where the research is being conducted, places like Delhi and Bangalore and Mumbai. And so, yeah, I graduated in 2014. I knew I wanted to come back to India. I grew up a little bit in the US, but then also spent a lot of my school life in India. And I missed it very much. So I wanted to come back, and I knew I was interested in working on cities. I didn't specifically know exactly what I wanted to do. So when I came back, I just started sending out cold emails, writing to people who wrote about cities, journalists, researchers, consultants, whoever I could find on the internet who was working in cities, about cities, doing research on cities. It was a little bit challenging. I think at that point in time, very few people in India understood what a liberal arts degree was. But I got lucky that one of the journalists I contacted actually went to a liberal arts degree, and she reached out and she told me about a studio in Mumbai that was being set up that was actually already set up by Columbia University's graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. And it was a lab to study, how do you communicate the challenges of rapid urbanization, right? To people who are not aware, who are not geographers, who are not urban planners, who are just, regular people living in the city. How do you communicate these challenges and bring them to the forefront of knowledge? I got very lucky that by the time she was telling me about it, she also told me they are hiring. And I ended up working there for about 1.5 years. It was a really unique experience because I got to conduct research on urban challenges like informality, homelessness, climate change. And I got to communicate my research to people who were not technical experts through stories and through art, right? And that was a really unique way to communicate and to share these challenges, to raise awareness, and make sure people really understood what was happening in their city and not getting caught up in their day-to-day lives. But it reached a point where I realized that in India, at least, there's only so much you can do with a bachelor's degree. In India, a lot of the jobs that I was looking at wanted master's degrees or PhDs, which is challenging, right? So I was like, I'm going to go back and do a master's. So I ended up getting a master's in city and regional planning at Penn Design. It's the School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania. I ended up specializing in community development. But while I was there, I ended up taking a ton of courses on environmental planning. And it really, really, drove my interest in working in climate change and working in cities in South Asia. I ended up doing a summer research study in Dhaka in Bangladesh with the International Center for Climate Change and Development, because I really wanted some experience working in climate change in the region, in cities, in this part of the world. I always wanted to come back here. And so, yeah, it was a 2-year program. I finished, and then upon graduation, I was looking for jobs. It was the last semester of my degree, and I think we had a guest lecturer who was talking about the Netherlands and a lot of the flood resilience work that's being done there. But he worked, I don't know if y'all know Henkel Bank, but there's a lot of flood resilience work that's being done, and he worked in a global team, the person who was giving the guest lecture. And so he came back, and I happened to be in a class with him, and I was like, hey, you know any global work that's being done in India, right? You talk about cities in Southeast Asia, you're talking about cities in like South America. So do you know anything about South Asia? And he said, you've picked a really tough place, but there's actually the 100 Resilient Cities program, which was started by the Rockefeller Foundation. They were starting their first national level project. For the most part, they worked with cities, but in India, they wanted to work with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which I think is the equivalent of HUD in the US. And so he connected me to the people at the Rockefeller team, and I applied for the job in Delhi, and I got it, and it was great. And I moved back to Delhi, and it was fascinating to start to work within national government and really think, how do you come up with frameworks to get more than 4,000 urban local bodies to think about resilience? India at that point had launched their smart cities mission. They were very interested in employing technology to think about urban challenges. And so a lot of my work was, how do you connect technology and climate change and resilience? How do you think about data for flood resilience, for example, right? It was fascinating, but I missed working in one city on one challenge. 4,000 cities is a lot. It's really hard to create policy for that many cities. I remember there was an exercise we did, and it was about cycling. It was about non-motorized transport and trying to get people to adopt it. And a lot of cities in the mountainous region in the Himalayas were like, you've got to be kidding. We cannot be doing this. Like, there are going to be accidents. There's no culture of this. You can't force us to do this. And then I was like, I can't be working at this scale where there's not enough context. Right. So I really wanted to work at a city level. So I moved to where I am now, right, which is Transitions Research, the Science Research Collective. And I have been working as part of their Urban Living Lab team since 2020. So I don't think the US had the same kind of lockdown that India did. India went to complete shutdown. But when we opened back up towards the end of 2020, I moved to Goa, started this role. And my work with my other organization, the Center for Social and Behavior Change, kind of happened by fluke. I actually, with Transitions Research, worked on a proposal for the MacArthur Foundation, but we weren't eligible due to lots of complicated grant funding criteria. So we actually just took it to the university as a partnership because they could accept the money. So that's how I ended up with Ashoka University. But it's been really interesting to work with them because I am not a behavioral scientist. I've never taken a psychology class. And so to really think about, my work has always been, how do you provide the infrastructure to get people to walk, to cycle, to take metro or buses? But now it's like, how do you encourage a normative and value-based shift to get people to move out of their private vehicles and actually take that? So it's been really fun. And I think I think that's a good overview. I can talk about anything in more detail if needed.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And
Oh, sorry.
All right, so you heard from Ashali. I think I counted at least 5 stops on her path to where she currently is. So now I'd like to ask the panelists to describe the pathways that have taken them from sort of the lawn in front of Forest to wherever it is you are now. And maybe we can start at the other end of the row. And that's you, Steve. You're actually, I don't know if you can see the geography of the room, but you're at the far end.
Yeah, I can. Sure. So, oh boy, yeah, I'm horrified. I'm the oldest one on this panel. I couldn't believe it when I saw the list. I still feel like I'm a young alumni, and I guess not. But let's see. I had this moment when I was at Middlebury. I think I was a Feb, so I think I was going into my last semester, where all of a sudden I was like, what am I going to do with a geography degree? Like what, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden I kind of, not that I freaked out too much, but I had this meeting with Glenn Andres, who's a professor in the art history department. I don't know if he's still there, and they've retired. He also was involved with the pre-architecture program as well. And I had a meeting with him, and I was like, I think I want to be an architect. And I kind of like walked through my background, my interests, and he was like, okay, well, it sounds interesting, but I think you want to be an urban planner. And I hadn't really even heard of what urban planning necessarily was, like as a profession at the time. But I was like, sure, I'm going to look into this. And he directed me to a few summer programs, actually, that were kind of like pre-grad school programs where you could build up your design portfolio. So I did this program over the summer, learned more about urban planning. It was fantastic. I actually met my now wife there, so it had dual purposes of this program. And it was kind of like, do you want to be an architect? Do you want to be an urban planner? Do this summer program, and you'll be able to like kind of walk in their shoes for a little bit and see if that's what you really want to do. And it was great. It was actually called like career exploration or something like that. And it was a great program. So I kind of led me in the direction to urban planning. But I knew I didn't want to go straight back to grad school there right after Middlebury. So I wanted to get a role that was kind of similar to urban plan. I ended up working as a residential green building consultant. That was actually in the Bay Area. I really wanted to move to San Francisco. All my friends from Middlebury were moving to San Francisco, and I got a job in Davis, California, which on like a map, talk about geography, on a map of the scale of the United States, it looks like it was in the Bay Area, but turns out it's not the Bay Area. I had to zoom in a little bit. It was more like Sacramento, which is not San Francisco, but it's still a great experience. I did that for a couple of years and then realized it was actually this one project I was working on for the firm. They were very proud of it. It was the first LEED certified housing development. So it was like tract homes, like all new homes, all LEED certified. Everyone was very psyched about it. And I went to tour the project, and it was, these beautiful green homes in the middle of what used to be, farm fields about 30 miles outside the center of Sacramento. Everyone who was living there had to drive everywhere. There's no sidewalks. I was like, this is completely missing the point. Sure, they have fancy solar panels and stuff like that, but it's not green by any means. And so that was like the moment I was like, all right, I need to shift my focus here. So I went back to grad school in Denver, actually. That was some advice I got from mentors, like go to grad school where you want to live after, specifically for like urban planning, architecture, because you're going to learn so much about the local city and the regulations and the networking and stuff like that. So I really wanted to move to Denver. So that's why I went to grad school in Denver, and just happened to, one of my professors was the planning director for the city of Denver. And I really impressed him, I guess, because he hired me while I was a student there. I ended up working for the city of Denver for about 10 years, long range planning. So specifically kind of like, what does the city want to be in 10, 20 years? What is neighborhood planning? What's the vision of like the long range vision for this neighborhood in Denver? And it was a great experience. Did that for about 10 years. And then also I got to this point in my career where I was just like, not that there's anything wrong with being in the public sector for your entire career, but I didn't want to go my entire career never really working in the private sector. So I made a switch and started working for an urban planning engineering consulting firm. I did that for a couple of years, quickly learned, consulting is not necessarily for me. And then was presented this amazing opportunity with Vail Resorts, where I was like, wait, I can be an urban planner for ski resorts, like combining my passion, like my professional passions with my personal passions. I'm long my entire life been a diehard skier. It's probably why I went to Middlebury College for a number of different reasons, but it's probably number one. I was like, wait, a college with their own ski area, sign me up. So yeah, it's been a dream come true doing things I've focused on for my entire career, but getting to mix that with things that I do on the weekends in my spare time. So it's been a lot of fun. I'll shut up now.
Emma, do you want to go next?
Okay, so I graduated 3 years ago, so my path is a little bit shorter. I've also I've only had one job since graduating, so I guess I'll backtrack a little bit to while I was at Mid, because what I do now is cartography, which is kind of a niche area to be in, if you can even imagine cartography. So I guess I'll backtrack a little bit and go from there. But so while I was at Middlebury, I knew, I think before I even declared a geography major, I saw the cartography class was offered, and I thought that was really interesting because I've always really been into art and design, and also that coupled with this interest in geography and looking at people's relationship with space and how people interact with space. Kind of those two interests came together really beautifully in cartography. So that was really interesting. But honestly, the reason I took the class was because I wanted to learn how to use Illustrator, and that was like the only class at Middlebury that offered it. So yeah, pre-geography major, Emma signed up for this cartography class. I think that was my first semester sophomore year, and I thought it was really cool. I learned that I'll never take a map for granted ever again. And so I took that class. It was really cool, but that was very early on, and I didn't think anything would come of it. I just thought it would be this cool skill. And that was that. And then I ended up taking an internship with Ben Meter, who's also a Middlebury alum in Maine. And I don't know if that internship is still happening, but it was through the geography department that I found him. And that also kind of felt random to me at the time. I didn't really think of cartography still as a viable option then, but I thought living in Maine would be really cool for a summer. So I did that. And then it just kind of, those things kept happening, and I didn't really think of it as pursuing cartography at the time, but I think subconsciously maybe I was. But anyway, my senior J term, Ben Meter, who was my boss at that internship, came to guest teach a class. I don't remember what it was called, but it was basically a quick cartography class, and maybe seniors now would have overlapped. I don't know. That was 2021 January. But anyway, so that was more of a quick cartography class, and I almost didn't take it because I was like, I've done the cartography thing. What more is there to even learn? Turns out there's a lot, and I'm still learning. So I took that class because I knew Ben, and I thought that would be really cool. And yeah, it was this quick turnaround cartography class that was a lot more focused on answering questions. So maybe he would have a scenario that a certain land, management organization wanted to do something, and how would we, show the best place to show or have solar panels or something. It was a lot more question focused. So we would go find the data, and it was such a busy semester, but we would find the data, do the analysis, and then make maps that effectively told what we wanted to share. So that class was really, reflecting back now, really important because it really bulked up my portfolio in a way that I never thought I would / didn't know I would benefit so much from. But basically when I graduated, I feel like I was in the same boat as a lot of people where I had genuinely no idea what I wanted to do whatsoever. And I feel like I spent a lot of time at Middlebury thinking about, okay, geography, GIS, that's something that will get me a job, which you'll see that it's not just GIS, it's a lot of other things that will help you. But anyway, that was not, I don't know. I always found the cartography part a lot more interesting because like I said, a lot of my background was a lot of my interests were in design and art. So that is how I found my job. I wanted to move to New York, so I started looking at cartography positions in New York, which there aren't many, but they're out there. And then, yeah, I'm still there 3 years later. Yeah.
Sure. So talking about how we got to where we are, more or less.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm an urban planner. When I was a senior during the spring, I kind of was freaking out about finding a job. I applied to a bunch of things. I sort of just like grabbed one. It was, I was like, this could be okay. It was like an investment firm, small investment firm that invested in like sustainable projects, biofuels, controlled environment agriculture, like greenhouses. Very cool, but I just was not happy there. And there's frustration will really lead you to apply to other things. Like being in a bad place can motivate you to get yourself in a good place. And even as I was applying to a bunch of jobs, I reached out to Joe and asked him to help me write some recommendations for me. And he was like, yeah, that, the things you're looking at in urban planning, he was like, that makes way more sense. I wasn't really sure why you were doing what you did. So and I think it's perfectly fine to have a place to land and figure it out from there. That's what I did. So, I mean, I knew I was interested in urban planning. I grew up in Hong Kong, big city, very different from Middlebury. I missed being in cities. I started to think about why cities and places in the US were so different. But also, brought in, there's this map that, again, Joe had on one of his slides in like Geography 100. And it was from the Detroit Geographic Expedition of where Black kids get run over by commuters on the Points Downtown track. And I remember that map, and I bring it up a lot because it sort of helped me start to think about how the built environment influences social outcomes, and how it is so tied into social systems, economic systems, and the way that power plays out over space. So that is where I sort of was like planning. This is something I want to do. It felt like a way that I could, maybe make some kind of positive change in the world. So I landed at an urban and economic development consulting firm in New York City. It was fine. I worked on like 4 different projects at a time. It was pretty intense, but I got to learn a lot of things very quickly and work on a very wide range of projects, which, it helps to sort of be able to build out a portfolio early on in your career. But this was, summer of 2019 through 2020. But then when the pandemic hit, I got laid off. That was rough, but those things happen, got to roll with it. When I was at this firm, I had been talking to a lot of other planners there about whether or not they had gotten their master's degree and how important they thought it was. They said, for consulting, not that important. If you want to end up in the public sector, it is important to have that more formal training, as well as like, I hate to say it, but like the credential, the letters after your name. And I knew I wanted to stay in New York City. So when I got laid off, I was like, okay, I'd sort of been on the fence about grad school, and I decided to apply to planning programs. So I started at NYU the fall of 2020, which was a weird experience, but good. Very practical program, again, very New York City focused. While I was a student there, I worked part-time, again, in sort of private sector consulting, but sort of with the ultimate goal of knowing that I wanted to be in the public sector. It just felt like a place where I could, have some kind of impact, bring about some kind of change, and also interact with like people with needs that are not just like, I need to tenant this building and make a return. But yeah, so I just sort of sought out opportunities to be involved in planning in New York City. I worked with community boards through a fellowship in the city. And then my senior spring, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I saw a posting for a position at the Department of City Planning pop up. It was with the waterfront and open space team. A couple months after I started, we sort of changed our name to better fit the work we did, which is climate and resilience planning. I didn't have the qualifications for that job, but I decided to apply anyways. I think my GIS skills actually like really sort of bolstered me through because one of the team members, there's just like a lot of luck that sort of falls into these things. Someone was going on like parental leave and they were leaving behind a big GIS project. And I had the skills to sort of fill in that hole. But, you know, just, I'm not going to say like throw your resume out into the world because you should, you know, be thoughtful about where you are applying to and whether or not you'd be happy there. But like, it's always worth a shot. But I've been at city planning for almost 2 years and I've really enjoyed it. And I've been able to learn a lot, grow a lot.
All right. My route's a lot longer than some of these as well. I kind of have 3 circuitous threads of my career that have gone in and out of through this. So starting back at mid, you know, I took GIS, was like, this is hard, but I see the value in this. I want to use this. And then I took cartography and it was like, oh wait, this can be fun. So clearly I'm on the cartography side of things, not the GIS analyst side of things. So I knew that was something, if I was going to use GIS, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the GIS work, but do that extra step with the design work. And that was the side of that I was really passionate about. I also, one of the geography classes that was taught by a visiting professor, when I was a student, he had one slide in one presentation that I completely latched on to. It was about participatory mapping, the bottom-up community mapping work, and I went all in on that. I designed an independent study, and that took me through a lot of different things further down the line as well. So I'll come back to those, but I graduated Middlebury. I did the geography internship at National Geographic, which unfortunately no longer exists, which is the case of a few of my things, which says my age as well, Stephen. But there are other internships that are usually posted at National Geographic. I think they were posted about a month or 2 ago. So around that time, next year is the time. And I usually email Bill with those if anybody is interested in applying for those. After that, I received the Compton Mentor Fellowship, which also no longer exists, but it was kind of a mix between the Fulbright and the Watson, where I self-designed a project which was focused on participatory mapping. And was selected for funding for that project, which was amazing. If you are interested in something like that, take advantage of the Watson, take advantage of the Fulbright, do those things now right out of school when you still have access to those types of opportunities, if that's something that is exciting to you. That was an incredible experience for me. I mean, being your own boss right out of college and doing your own self-design project is pretty amazing. Makes the real world hard to come back to, but it was great. So I was doing participatory mapping, facilitating participatory mapping work on important historical, cultural, and ecological sites across islands split between the countries of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada in the Eastern Caribbean. And I made that connection with a lecture in this room a decade and a half ago. It was an environmental studies lecture where the woman came and she mentioned some participatory mapping work that she was doing. And I went up to her afterwards and I was like, I want to take you to lunch. Connect me with, like, tell me more about what you're doing. Connect me to the people that you've been doing it with. And that's how that all happened as well. So staying after in these kind of things is valuable for what it's worth. Yeah, so I did that. I came back up to the US and I reached out to an alum pre-mid to mid who had his own cartographic firm in Maine. Ben's my my bestie from my Feb class. He had a cartographic firm, a small cartographic firm in small town Maine, and he offered me an internship when I emailed and said I wanted to do cartography and wanted to
start digging into that. And so I got to work on a lot of really cool projects in Maine on outdoor recreation kind of stuff with land trusts, and was really able to build up my portfolio in that job, which was awesome, because if you're interested in doing anything related to GIS and cartography and physically making maps, building up your portfolio is really, really valuable to do the show, don't tell of your job application. You know, your resume and your cover letter tell your portfolio shows that not only do you have down that you took GIS, but you know how to use it. So that was that big moment for me, was I was really able to build that up and show that I was able to do this work for all the future stuff that I was able to pull through. And at that point, I, was in my mid-20s and decided I could either go to grad school then, or I was likely not going to be willing to go back to school again later on. So I made the decision to take that step out and go to grad school. For this again, I knew I wanted to get back abroad to do that as well. I knew exactly what I wanted to write my thesis on, and I wanted that to pull me back into participatory mapping. So my thesis, and I went in with this idea, which influenced where I ended up going, that I wanted to focus on participatory mapping and how it's been used and how it can be better used across small island developing states to address a lack of climate change data, particularly in the region, because just the scale of climate change data doesn't scale well in small islands. So that's what I focused on for my thesis. I ended up going to the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago for that, which really helped with the work that I wanted to continue doing in the Caribbean. And I feel like I've glossed over a few other threads of my career that were happening alongside all of this. I also got back into my bird nerd days from elementary school, middle school, tied back into that and ended up doing bird conservation work as well alongside this part-time. I work for an organization called Birds Caribbean on the side, and I've been making maps for them for almost a decade now, and wrote a bird book, a whole thing. But that's my third thread, where I'm just kind of continuing to keep all of these interests alive in little bits and pieces throughout my career. And after grad school, I came back up to the US and ended up back at National Geographic, where so there's multiple teams for maps at National Geographic. There's the magazine, there's books, National Geographic Society, which is more on the education side of things, also has a team. And then my team is focused on outdoor recreation maps. So those Trails Illustrated maps that you see at REI on the map wall, that's what we work on. So maps get you out hiking and stuff. So there's a lot going on if anybody wants to dig into any of those variety of things, but I've definitely not sat still over the last 15 years.
So I graduated in 2015, and when I graduated, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I kind of got into the geography major a little bit late, and so only took a couple of GIS classes like them. Honestly, wasn't great at them, and so I just, really didn't know where to go. But I ended up getting a job at Foreign Policy magazine. I found the post on like a mid-jobs board, and so I worked directly for the CEO. I was like his executive assistant, and that was interesting. I did that for 2 years, but really didn't see a future in that. And then after 2 years, I was bored sitting at a desk every day, really wanted to just kind of shake things up. So I joined the Navy. I commissioned through officer candidate school, but my dad was in the military. So that's kind of why that was floating around in my head. And I knew, it was a great way to see the world, broaden my experience, and just be around completely different types of people. And so I did that for, I think, 5 years I was at sea, and I was on 2 different ships, and found that I could use GIS in different ways. So I did like mission planning for missiles, and you're using like visual terrain models and mapping and things like that. So I also did anti-submarine warfare, and for that I did like bathymetry mapping and sonar mapping. So that was pretty cool. And then I went to Office of Naval Intelligence afterwards and did intelligence work where I actually used GIS products to kind of add cartography and different maps into analysis. And so now I am at the Pentagon and I am doing legislative affairs. So entirely different, but the Navy just kind of like pushes you through different jobs. So you never really stay in one place. And I just got my master's in GIS. So yeah.
Great, thank you. I realize we have about 10, 15 minutes left. And I hesitate to ask my questions without giving the audience a chance to ask their questions. So take 10 seconds and think about a question that's popped up in your head, and then we'll call on whoever has one. And if you remain silent, I've got some.
We don't need to end right at 5:30.
Yeah.
We know you'll get to dinner on time. As we do.
Yeah, Samuel.
So for those of you who have worked in both the public and private sectors, is there anything you wish you knew or had known prior to, trying to navigate both of those landscapes? Like, are they different in ways that you weren't initially aware of? Is there any advice that you have regarding that?
Yeah, I can chime in. There's a lot that I wish I knew when I was, because I spent 10 years in the public sector before working in the private sector. And there's a lot that I learned in the public sector that made me a better private sector planner. And there was a lot that when I was in the private sector, I was like, man, I wish I knew this when I was in the public sector. So I strongly encourage, if you're kind of like wrestling with like what to do, I strongly encourage trying to do both. Because I feel like having that experience in one makes you more well-rounded and understanding the pressures that like a private sector, I only know planning, so I'm just going to talk about urban planning, but like a private sector planner is under all sorts of different pressures that I didn't really realize when I was in the public sector. Like as a public, in the public sector, we would hire these consultants and they would come help us with these projects. And I never really quite understood really what the business side of planning was. I was like, why can't they give us, these maps on time? And we asked for these revisions, and why aren't we getting these revisions? And I just didn't realize that they had to charge for their time, and they had to make a profit as they're running a business. They weren't just doing this out of the goodness of their heart, helping us on these projects. But then when I was in the private sector, I had a much better understanding of the pressures that the public sector planners under, in terms of, they can't just, when you're talking to a senior planner, they can't just make a decision, on the fly, like a major decision. They have to make sure that it aligns with, their department lead, the mayor, whatever it is, the city council. It's not like you can't just make those decisions overnight. And you could get frustrated with how long things take, but things take a long time. Some of that decision-making process takes a long time, for better or for worse, but that follows a system in terms of making sure there's alignment through different departments, all the way up to the mayor. So I feel like having those experiences on both sides, and having that giving grace to that your kind of counterpart on the other side, it really was the best advice I could have. And unless you experience that yourself, it's kind of hard just to put yourself in their shoes.
Emily, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would agree with really all of those points. It sucks to have to limit your time in the private sector because you are working on so many different things, and there's this constant fear of going over budget or being inefficient, which I can spend as much time on things as I can in the public sector, and not need to worry about the business side of things. I will say though, what's been interesting about both the private and the public sector has been the different ways that you have to be creative. I feel like when you're working in the private sector, you can have more novel ideas and bring sort of a very wide range of things to like a client or to the people that you're working for. And that is really exciting to have this sort of like universe of things open to you. I think you have to be creative in a very different way in the public sector where you're facing so many different constraints, whether they are, you know, public opinion, policy, like financial considerations. There are just like smaller tweaks you have to, it's just a very, I feel like, different way of thinking the barriers that you face in each of the sort of sectors. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm Ola. Other than luck, what do you think has helped you the most in your journey? People, I guess, like a job, I don't know. Like, what do you think has been your biggest propeller to where you are now?
I feel like Ali said this, but for my job specifically, and I imagine yours also are similar roles, having something to show that you like the portfolio, I think was huge for me, especially because I also think, okay, so having this portfolio where you can really show what you've done and like kind of prove that you know what you're talking about, going hand in hand with like having genuine interest in what you are pursuing, I think was super important to me, at least, because I remember, so I had kind of accumulated this portfolio of work throughout my time at Mid, like without knowing it kind of. And then I just kind of threw it together in a website, made it look nice. And then when I had my first interview, I was like so nervous going into it, but then like the time absolutely flew by because the first interview was really just talking about what, like going through my portfolio. And we just had this phone call where I talked about why I made the certain design decisions that I did, how I got to that process, if I would change anything. And it really just felt like a conversation because it was something that I was really interested in and like could talk so passionately about. So I think like maybe as cheesy as it sounds to like be passionate about what you want to do, I really think that that was helpful for me, along with having that work to like go along with it. But like, yeah, that like, I think we ended up speaking for like 2 hours or something crazy and it just kind of flew by. So I don't know, that was helpful for me.
Yeah, I would definitely say on that note with portfolios, while you're still students and you have, I don't know if you guys are using Q or ARC or what you're normally using these days, but in case you don't have access to software after the fact, save all your maps in a PDF format, something you can access again after you don't have access to software anymore. So that if you want to take the maps that you made, that first map you made in GIS class, that you look back at it and you're like, oh, ouch, I've learned so much since then. I don't feel like this is good enough to put on my portfolio. You have access to that file in a way that you can throw it into a software and make adjustments based on what you've learned since then. So you don't have to start from scratch to make new maps, to build up your portfolio. You can use what you've created already and add on what you've learned since then to make that into a portfolio worthy map. So it shouldn't feel, hopefully it shouldn't feel like a big stress to develop a portfolio if this is the field you want to go down where that matters a lot. Beyond that, I forgot to mention, I also have been freelancing. I have my own freelance business and I've been doing that for all of this time. That's another way to build up your portfolio, is to, do little maps for your friend's mom or, for just little things like that. Those are great little practice projects to throw up on your portfolio early on. And back to the main question, networking, as much as I feel like that's no one wants to hear that. I would say almost all of my jobs have obviously, solid CV, solid portfolio, whatever, but all of those have also had a networking component where I'd networked with the alumni while I was a student and ended up emailing him when I got back to the States. And he said, yeah, come up, you can intern here. Like as simple as that. So making connections, especially when you're not looking for a job this second, making those connections and holding on to those and getting back in touch with those people can be really, really valuable for that job hunt.
And I think from my perspective, if you have a job out of college that you maybe don't love, or maybe it's not exactly in a subject area that you are super passionate about, I think if you try to do the best job that you can in that job and really just expand past maybe what's, what the job description is. And so that way you can use it as a stepping stone to something greater or something better. So, I've had plenty of positions that don't have any sort of GIS component on the surface, but just through some digging, I've realized, this department or whatever has a GIS license, and I can actually incorporate that. So don't just do what your job says on paper per se. You can always expand on that and try to, redirect it into something else. So.
I did that at the language schools office when I was working as an admin assistant. I helped make maps for the summer program on where the housing was. Like, that had nothing to do with my job, but I turned it into that and was able to use it on my portfolio and stuff in the future.
Also, don't undersell the work that you're already doing here at Mid, right? Like, I like to include, I'm bad at making maps. Like, they were ugly and when I took cartography. But like the skills you learn, I think it's always great to, have a section of your resume that's like dedicated to like analytical methods, right? Like my freshman year, I took rural geography with Pete and like, hey, demographic analysis. I know how to do that. Let me put that on my resume. Like, it's not exactly a portfolio, but you're building a skill profile. That is pretty helpful.
Nice.
Hi, I have a question that I've been told is a bad question. But I'm wondering if any of y'all would speak to finding work-life balance after being at Middlebury, where there's maybe less of that, and trying to go into a career that you feel good about and that you can work really hard in, but also finding a little sanity and not working all the time.
It's not even about being in a union, right? Like, I never pulled an all-nighter at Middlebury. I never thought that the difference between an A- and an A was ever worth it. That's just like the way I think about things. So I took that mindset with me into work as well. And I really let myself be motivated by the fact that I care about my work. And I'm always like pretty honest about that. And work, I don't know, life gets in the way of things, and work-life balance is just like super, super important. I think people appreciate that if that is something that you can be honest about. And I won't say that I'm always super balanced, but
Yeah, I don't think I quite had respect for work-life balance until I had 3 kids, and then all of a sudden my time became incredibly limited. Right now it seems like it's either with my kids or working. And so if anyone has any tips, or I'm curious if I've still not figured out work-life balance. A word of caution. So our company's fully remote. So I work from home every day, which you think it's amazing in a lot of ways, because I do have flexibility like during the day. I'm not at the office. I don't have to commute to an office. So it saves me time, to drop my kids off at school, stuff like that. But I'm also always working. My work is at my house, and my computer is always on. It's really hard to separate work from home. I was all the way back at Middlebury. I was the type of person that I never did actual work in my dorm room. I would go to the library or somewhere else. I had to physically separate work from home life. And now I don't have that separation. So it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. So as you're looking for jobs and maybe you want to work remote, there's some there's something nice about like working at the office, and then when you leave the office, you're done working and you can go enjoy some other things. So just, keep that in mind as you're looking at opportunities.
I absolutely do not have work-life balance, through no fault of my employer, but I do way too many things on the side. But I will say that's a good opportunity for if you're applying for a job, if you're really interested in a specific company, network with people at the company, ask them those questions. That it could be a company that looks on paper to value work-life balance, or they say they value work-life balance, and that's just not the case on the ground. So that's a good question to ask people that are already working at organizations or companies that you might be interested in applying for.
I think I work in an office, so I don't, go in. I don't work remotely, but there's some people that I've encountered in my career that will work, way more than they need to, that they feel like they always have to be in the office, and that can make you feel pressure to also be there all the time too, or also work all the time too. And it doesn't have to be like that. I think it really is about, quality over quantity of hours. So if you're able to spend, 10 hours in the office, vice 15, but you're able to get, that's an extreme amount of hours, but you're able to get all of your work done, and go ahead and produce, quality work, then I think that shows a lot to your bosses or whoever's looking. So just don't feel pressure to necessarily work all the time if everyone else is.
I'm mindful of the time, but I also want to ask one question. That you've all talked a lot about GIS and cartography. I'm wondering if you can reflect on other things you learned at Middlebury that you find useful and helpful in your day-to-day work in the jobs that you've landed in.
So I would say definitely critical thinking, really how to learn a topic and ask the right questions in order to kind of gain mastery over it. I've been thrust into several positions throughout my career that I have no educational background for, like working on like a ship's engineering plant or like driving a ship. Like I never did any of that at Middlebury. It was rough. Like didn't even know what a pump was. And there's lots of pumps in an engineering plant. So, but I, through Middlebury, like I learned how to ask the right questions and how to study, and how to really, pick apart a topic and really try to understand it at a deeper level. So that's allowed me to perform well at jobs that I really have no business doing. So
I guess I would say something along the lines of being assertive and standing up for yourself and pushing to a certain extent. I would say that there are definitely times that I did that at Middlebury and it made a difference. And there have been very, very significant times that has made a huge difference in my career. I think that you can get to certain points with positions where you can leave or you can help things change. And sometimes the answer is to help things change versus, and that has successfully worked for me in the past. And I would say that, coming into yourself at Middlebury, like that stage in your life where you're, getting older, you're coming into yourself and learning to stand up for yourself and be that person, I think is something that for that time of your life, you can continue to carry on. Even if you're at the bottom of the totem pole in your job, you should still be assertive.
Good advice. I should take it. I would say that, the critical thinking, I think, is a really important part, being able to take a lot of information and distill it down to like what is important context, and to be able to craft a narrative from that, like a reason for why you are saying the things you're saying, why you're trying to do the things that you're trying to do, and figure out the best way to like advance an idea or stop an idea if you think it's a bad one.
I feel like one thing that so we talk a lot about GIS and like, yeah, that's great. It's hard. But But one thing that I feel like it teaches you, even if you hated GIS, like I cried in my GIS lab so many times. Joe saw me. But like, I feel like one thing that it really helped me with was like kind of thinking about how to approach a problem, even if you don't really know, like, okay, is that like a union or an intersection or whatever, or, you know, area reaggregated, whatever. Like it's still like I still have this way of thinking where it's very methodological and like it's like, okay, you can kind of think through how you're gonna do it, even if you don't really know what that is quite yet. Like it's like an organized way of approaching a problem. So I think that's something that you pick up from GIS classes that isn't actually like the hard skills. And also to the note of like people, you know, GIS is important, but like Google exists and it really helps me sometimes when I have to use GIS. The GIS classes are great though. Like I learned a lot. Where was I going with this? Okay. Also, this is kind of a separate thought. But I also think that going with a bit of what Cathryn said, being in journalism, I see a lot of different topics every day and things that I'm unfamiliar with. So I think like kind of reacquainting myself every day with whatever topic I'm faced with. I feel like that kind of stemmed from, or I learned a lot about that in the geography major, just because I don't know. I feel like in geography, there's so many different classes. There's like the economic geography, there's the historical geography, there's physical geography, and there's so many like lenses of how to view something. And I find that is really valuable in my work every day. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick. So Middlebury really taught me I learned a lot at Middlebury, but two things I still remember to this day. That I learned at Middlebury. First thing is Middlebury really learned to be either embrace or be comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, like just the liberal arts curriculum, having to take all these different types of classes, things that I had no idea about. I remember my very first class in Middlebury was this class, I don't know if it's still offered, called the creative process, where okay, I must still be there. It was the first class. It meant in a ballet studio, and like the teacher was like, I walked in, he's like, no, go, you have to take off your shoes. And I went to like an all boys prep school in New England, and like my first class at this college is like I'm in a ballet studio. I'm not wearing any shoes. I'm like, what's going on here? Turns out I love that class. It was incredible. But there was also, I mean, the oral exams, I don't know if you still do that for the major, that was uncomfortable as hell. I still remember Pete was drilling me with some questions like, what is GIS? And I was like answering the question, and then but what is GIS? I was like, what is he doing to me right now? Like, sort of but like as a planner, you're constantly being put in these really uncomfortable situations. And I just learned to like, you have to embrace it and you just have to roll with it. You can't just get too uncomfortable. You can't kind of like clam up. You just kind of have to get through it and learn to love it, because like, man, there's been so many times I was like standing in front of a community meeting and people are screaming at me about my bus was late. Why was my bus late? I'm just like, I don't work for the transit agency. I don't know, but the other thing, Middlebury, I learned at Middlebury, it's gonna sound corny, but like, you know, that advice you always hear, if you do what you love, then you never have to do a day of work in your entire life. But I kind of had an epiphany, and Pete, not to like, put you on too much of a high horse here, but it was in your urban geography class. I think it was like the final paper. It was about, and I wrote this paper that was comparing the different kind of eras of urban development, comparing that to using baseball stadiums as like a proxy to describe these different types of, the urban, phases of urban development. And I remember writing that paper, and it was the first time in my entire academic career that I legitimately had fun doing homework. Like I had so much fun writing that paper. Like researching these quotes from baseball players talking about like, these baseball stadiums in the 1970s and how much they hated playing on AstroTurf and comparing that to like modernism, like modernism in urban planning and stuff like that. And it was so much fun. And I was just like, I don't know what just happened, but I needed to do this for like the rest of my career. This was fun. And it's kind of like what I ended up doing. So Pete, thank you for assigning that paper to me.
Wait, I have one more thing kind of going off of being uncomfortable, which is, it's slightly different, but I feel like when I was at Middlebury, there was a lot of imposter syndrome that I felt at time. And I like kind of learned how to like manage that feeling and not to like freak you out, but I still feel imposter syndrome in my job from time to time. And I feel like, honestly, like that's something that has helped me like kind of reframing it as like, I should, I'm here for a reason, like the same thing I would tell myself at Middlebury whenever I was feeling that, but that I feel like I've kind of encountered at my job as well. And just kind of reassuring yourself that like, everybody feels that way. It's not just you, like everybody has times like that. Oh.
All right. Oh, Tracy?
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
Do you have time?
Sure. Yeah.
Two things I just want to say. As one of the advisors here at CCI, I have so enjoyed the students who come in who are the geography majors. Because, and I'll say this, listening to you all in the, I don't know if you can hear, but listening to all of you on the panel say, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But in reality, what I do know is that you all are some of the best storytellers here on campus, because that's what you do all the time. And even if you don't necessarily know how you're going to apply it, you all have these incredible tools that you've been building as stories. And so I just want to say that, and it was Pete, I remember one time, this was years ago, coming up to you and saying, your majors really know how to explain what they're doing, because I don't know what geographers do other than, I used to get National Geographic. And hearing you talk about human geography and how to apply it to any different lens was just one of the most, it's so fulfilling for me because I'm on the other side talking to the employers. And the employers, and I just want to say, coming from DC a week ago, I went from, the Alliance for Peace Building to the Pentagon, to the National Counterterrorism Center, to Chemonics International Development Consulting Firm, there to the World Bank. And there were geographers in every one of those places. They talked about GIS, they talked about the planning and using what you guys do. So I just want to say there's a huge future and you just need to go out there and look for it. And we've got tons of lungs that we can do with.
You're there.
So I don't need to be on my course here, but it's just really exciting and fun to do it.
And I will say on that note, it is a hard field in that there's not, this is the title you're applying for. You have to read job descriptions, not just look at titles. Even in the cartography field, like I happen to have a cartographer title. Your title is one that you don't know to look for, graphic reporter. You have to know to look for that there are graphic reporters, maps, or graphic reporters, cartography, or just graphic reporter. And within there, you get to work on maps, just as an example. So you have to dig, not just look for a specific title in this field. And there's a lot of jobs that you can think your way through and be like, yes, I see where my geography skills, my GIS skills, my analytical skills can be useful in this position.
And when the position says, and related fields, you can say geography. Geography will always fit in the and related fields.
That's true.
Let's thank our panelists. I know we